All right, yesterday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry hit back at the G7 after the group released a communique in which they called on China to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, especially as it relates to Xinjiang and Hong Kong. Now, there is no longer denying. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I was out yesterday and Monday in a U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and China factored in very heavily as we talked about the abuse. In fact, as you know, or you may know, I've been sanctioned by the Chinese government for advocating for religious freedom in China, advocating for the Uyghurs, advocating against their horrific policies forcing abortions. Now they're backing off because of their demographic problems they have of their one child, two child policy. Now they're generously allowing families to have three. But the G7 leaders also underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, also called for a new investigation into China, into the origins of COVID-19, the coronavirus. China, not surprisingly, is not pleased. Here's what they had to say.
We have noticed that the joint communique of the G7 summit mentioned issues involving China, which deliberately smeared China on issues related to Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan, and China's marine territory and interfered in China's internal affairs. The act has seriously violated the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, which runs contrary to the trend of the times for peace, development, cooperation, mutual benefits, exposing the evil intentions of the US and a few other countries to artificially create antagonisms and instruments and widen differences and contradictions.
Now, if you're watching, not just listening, but if you're watching online, you saw the video. I don't know how that guy did that with a straight face. I really don't know how he said all that. Well, with me now to talk about China and the very things that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want us to talk about is Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler of Missouri. She serves on the Congressional Executive Commission on China and is a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee. She is also working very hard to defend the values that you and I care about on Capitol Hill as the co-chair of the Values Action Team. Vicky, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
All right, let me just jump right into this. How would you respond to the Chinese foreign minister's, the spokesman's comments about the G7 and earlier making the comment that America is very sick as it talks about the connection with COVID-19?
Well, they are just totally covering up the activities that they are waging against their own people and against the world. I mean, the fact is that they have over a million, almost 2 million Uyghur Muslims in internment camps in the Xinjiang province. And we know that. We've seen that from satellite photos. We have seen that from individuals who have escaped. They are conducting genocide in that region. And our own government, under Secretary Pompeo's leadership, we designated the Chinese government, the Communist Party, of committing genocide in that area. I introduced legislation called the SOS Act to stop oppressive sterilizations act, because even though, to your point, that they are encouraging more children to be born in other parts of their country because of their demographics and their failed one-child policy, which is coming back to haunt them. But in the Xinjiang province, we have seen a decrease in population because of the forced abortions and the sterilizations that they're inflicting on the women there. And so they have very much an evil intent, and to call us evil is just unbelievable. And certainly with what they did with the coronavirus, when they inflicted that on the world. Now, whether it was done purposely or by accident, we don't know, but we do know that it originated from China. And certainly now there's growing evidence that it came from their own Wuhan Institute of Virology, their own research lab, which was conducting research on how to make this virus more deadly. And then we had 3 researchers now that we know that a month before China even acknowledged this was a disease that went to the hospital with symptoms of COVID-19. And then they covered up anybody, whistleblowers and researchers and reporters and doctors, anybody who spoke out and tried to get the truth out about this. And as a result, we've had over 600,000 Americans who have died from this virus, and we've had millions worldwide. And so for them to say they did nothing wrong and that we're evil, I think it's totally opposite of reality.
You mentioned former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I really think the Trump administration set the stage that I don't think the Biden administration wants to be in this position, because they really can't back away from holding China accountable. Although it looks like to me they're trying their best to try to do that. But you recently produced a four-part series that outlines the multitude of threats that China presents to us, the military threats, the economic threats, the malign influence, and the human rights abuses that we were just talking about. And, I think about this, as President Biden was beginning the G7 meeting, he goes and he speaks to some of our members of the Air Force, and he says, the greatest threat facing America is global warming. What parallel universe is he living in?
It is just mind-boggling, and it is scary that here our leader of our country is supposed to be the leader of our world, is just acquiescing to this, either ignoring it or just totally clueless on this. And I do encourage people to go to my website at hartzler.house.gov and watch these videos, because there is so much information here. I want individuals to know. I'm, as you say, a senior member of the Armed Services Committee. I have been in classified briefings for years now, and this is open source information, but it's put together, for instance, put together in a way that I think would be very eye-opening to individuals in our country. For instance, on the military threat, how many Americans know that China has the world's largest Navy and the world's largest Army? How many people know that they have more ships than we do? They have more people in the Army, that they have more ground-based missiles, that they have over the last 10 years increased their defense budget by 75%. At the same time, now we have President Biden cutting in real dollars our defense budget. This is very, very concerning. On our videos, you'll see where we were at in comparison to China and capabilities and the number of planes and the number of assets in space and satellites and other things we had a few years ago, where we are now, and where we're projected to be in 10 years. It is very, very scary and concerning. And that's why I've been fighting so hard to increase our defense dollars to make sure we have the capabilities we need to be able to meet their threat. Then we have, as you talked about, the economic security. They have
before we go to that, I just want to underscore that not only do they have the materiel and the personnel, but they're acting in a very aggressive manner.
Absolutely. I have a friend who's going to be a missionary to Taiwan, and she is very concerned, as am I. That's one reason I reintroduced the Taiwan Defense Act with Representative Gallagher and others here recently, because since Biden has been in office, China has increased their aggression against Taiwan, and they are flying airplanes over Taiwan's airspace. They're threatening them. And this is a very real concern that they're going to try to invade or take over Taiwan. And we have to stand strong for them. We saw what they've done in the South China Seas, where they converted sandbars into military outposts all over the South China Sea in order to try to stop the freedom of navigation in that area, control that area. And they're just not, they're ignoring world order and opinion, and they're just going forward. And whether it be militarily or, like I said, with their Belt and Road Initiative, they're performing debt trap diplomacy all over the country, all over the world, as far as with our third world countries, gaining access to ports, to rare earth minerals, to other natural resources, trying to increase their influence worldwide. Because make no mistake, their goal is world dominance. And I think we need to take them seriously and not just say this is just some crazy idea. They have a plan, and they're implementing the plan.
Yeah, they certainly are. And a part of that plan is their economic strategy as well.
Yes, I mean, they have all this money that they loan to these third world countries at a very high interest rate. I've been to Sri Lanka. I have seen the port there that they were able to recapture because, of course, Sri Lanka could make those payments. And they said, okay, well, we'll run it if you just give us a 99-year lease. And so they've taken over that very key strategic place where their Navy could come if there's a conflict, or they can just control the commerce in the area. And they're doing this all over the world.
But at the same time that they're loaning out money, they're getting money from the World Bank at these low interest loans, which is being funded by the United States. This is what I've never really figured out. They get treated in many ways like an emerging, developing country, and they get these low interest free loans. But then at the same time, they're acting like a world power. So which are they?
No, exactly. They don't deserve any category of funding because they're a developing country. I mean, they are fully developed, and they're not just a near peer competitor. They are a competitor, in fact, have surpassed us in some of our military capabilities. They're economically very strong. They hold a tremendous amount of US debt. And that's why in America, we need to, certainly in Washington, balance our budget and pay off our debt. And so we're not so dependent on China, and we need to bring back our manufacturing from China here. I introduced legislation before the pandemic in a bipartisan fashion with John Garamendi to bring back our pharmaceutical production from China here to the United States, because we found out that most of the medicines and the antibiotics that our soldiers are getting either comes from China or comes from a country that uses the active pharmaceutical ingredients originating from China. And so theoretically, if we were to get into a conflict with China, they could win a war without firing a shot just by sending tainted medicines our way or inert ingredients. So we had already identified that threat. And I'm thankful that President Trump listened to our plea and stood up the Defense Production Act to start bringing back some of that medicine production here, not just for our soldiers, but for all of us. But we need to do that on other things like rare earth minerals. And now we've got these electronics and the chips that are made in those countries. And we're having a supply chain issue here because of our dependence on those issues as well. We're running out of cars ready to sell and other products here. So there's many reasons to bring back that production here, reduce our dependence on China.
We should learn from what we experienced in the last year and not consider it to be a one-off, something that won't happen again. We need to be following through with what we learned. We're almost out of time, Vicky, but one other thing I just wanted to mention, China gets a pass on this big global warming climate change agenda that Biden is pursuing with the other countries. China gets a pass on that. They got to continue to do what they're doing. I mean, this does not make sense on any front.
It's a foolish policy. It's a foolish policy to cut our energy production here, increase our cost here, and make us more dependent on other countries for our energy source, and at the same time, give China a pass. And they are the world's #1 producer of pollution, of carbon dioxide. They're building coal-fired plants on a regular basis there, as well as India.
Right.
And so why would we get back in the Paris Climate Accords, which ties our hands, and then frees them up to continue to pollute the world without these economic restraints? It is foolish.
Right. And they've shown that they don't want to be good neighbors. They have malintent on many, many fronts. Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, great to talk with you. Thanks for all the leadership you're providing on Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony.